Yeah, I'm here at the NRL office in Sydney now with Paul Heptonstall, who is the Senior NRL Wellbeing and Education Manager. Paul, first of all, thank you for having us here, the Rugby League Care staff, and discussing all things wellbeing. I know over the last few years we've had the opportunity to come over to the NRL and speak to you, and I personally thank you as well for everything you've done for us and all the advice you've given. Just a bit of a summary of what your role is and what your day-to-day work is.
Well, it's probably similar to yours, Steve. The broader approach around wellbeing. I'm the senior, so I've been the manager here for the NRL for 15 or 16 years now, after spending a bit of time at a couple of the clubs. And it's really just to keep growing the support for the athletes in all areas outside of their football. And we know that a lot of the stuff that we do in wellbeing will help their football, but it's a duty of care, but it's also the right thing to do, to make sure that players are developed beyond the football field, and a more balanced person is a better player. That's what we always say. So, but I'm very fortunate that the game between the NRL and the Players Association have invested in wellbeing, and it's my role and responsibility to make sure that we're best practice, and that's why it's really good to share things that you're doing in England, because a lot of our players will come and go, and we'll get some of your players here, and so it's really good to share things between the sports.
Brilliant. And I know you've been part of, you've been in this role for a number of years now, and you've seen the evolution of this space and wellbeing education, and how's that come about? What have been the major wins in this area, and the importance of making sure that it's constantly evolving?
No, it's a good question, because I think our game sort of really only went professional at the end of, towards the end of the 90s, and I'd probably show my age here, being around then. It was, we saw players give up their jobs overnight to become professional football players, and it was probably only the early 2000s where we realised that we'd had a lot of players that never had any work experience in anything other than football in their whole life. So we felt like there was a real duty of care to look after them. And I think in some of those early years we were more of a safety net when to be there to help people when they struggled. But I think we've really evolved into being a lot more proactive, and a big part of that is trying to make sure that we virtually insist that players have something with them to grow their identity outside being a footballer, because we know that everyone's going to retire at some stage. You're going to get injured, you're going to get suspended, and most won't even make $1 playing rugby league. So the importance of creating this identity for yourself outside of being a footballer is really important, and that flows onto someone's holistic well-being, around their values and how they see themselves as a person, and the good relationships they have in their life, caring for money and how to look after money, and also with things in their life like spirituality or the culture or the involvement in community, if they're really important to a person, we've got to make sure we really support that as well. So the game, the role of wellbeing, as you would know, has really evolved, and I think it's more from a really proactive side of things. I think the other really pleasing thing is, I think in the early days we're seen as a sort of a welfare support type program, but I think we've really grown into clubs' football departments where the coaches and the football managers and the CEOs really value what we do, because we know that we are a real protective measure for those players and the clubs, and we know that if a player is involved in some sort of career development off the field or are proactive with their well-being, that they're less likely to get in trouble, they're going to have a longer career, we know they're going to make more money, and their transition is going to be a lot smoother. So there's no real downside to what we do in well-being. So I think while we've got to push barriers, I think we've moved a long way, and as I said, the Super League are probably a really good example of, especially the last couple of years, being really progressive in what you're doing. So we're learning off each other in that way.
Yeah, I think the key has been a real collaborative approach between both competitions, and we've got a lot of NRL players coming over to obviously play in the UK. That's always happened, but what we're now seeing is a lot of our younger players and our current players coming over to play in the NRL. Some recently, both in the men's game and the women's game, and so I think sharing all that best practice is crucial for both of us. And just, one thing which is really interesting is the ruling regarding young players and education, and just what can give us a little bit more of an insight into that provision.
Yeah, well, we used to have a national youth competition where it was a no work, no study, no play policy. I suppose a bit like the university system in the States, where you had to maintain a certain grade point average. But we it actually really had a lot of traction. So we had a lot of players, being really engaged in off-field activities. And when we dissolved the national youth competition, we wanted to have that same rule for the professional players. So it didn't matter whether you're on 50,000 or 500,000. We actually made the rule to say if you're not doing something one day a week, we can't let you play. And fortunate enough, we haven't stood anyone down. But it is a rule, and we know that it's just for the best interests of the player. It doesn't have to be something too onerous, but it's just something outside the game which can grow their identity, grow this self-esteem, this sort of purpose outside of footy, which we know will help their footy. And I think all the clubs have really supported it. And we hope in those first couple of years, if we can get them on the pathway, then their time management and the players' perception of how important it is will continue, and they'll just do that for their whole career.